The entranceway, we know that the parsonage faced Park Avenue.
Right.
And it was two-story home.
Right.
Will you tell us something about the floor plan of so that you remember?
Well, it had a central hall, and my office opened onto the porch and into that hall. And it was a small room. It was not very big. Across the hall from that was what had been the parlor. It had a fireplace in it, and both ministers had desks in that room, and they could light a fire and it wouldn't blow out.
That's where the ministers.
And that's where their office was.
Do you remember there being weddings in the parsonage, the old parsonage?
I
Rather
don't,
than heating up a whole church, that you could heat up that one
that
space.
one space, and with the fireplace.
With the fireplace,
And I suppose there were. I remember witnessing, somebody told me that I had witnessed their wedding, but it was in the church, they just went in there and had a couple of people as witnesses. But I don't remember any particular weddings in there during the time I was there. During the time I was there, Walter James came as a voice instructor at Florida State, and he was hired part-time as the choir director and the children's choir director. I might mention that the children's choir started when my sister and I were the age to be in the choir, and Mother made our little white vestments and had big red bows. So that was the start of the children's choir during that time. But Walt directed that choir, and one day
his wife was the
organist, part of us when she could, but she was having children and sometimes didn't. But one day I was sitting in the office when the fire trucks drove up, and the fire department was across the park, about where the Doubletree Hotel is. There was an old post office building there that had become the city hall, and the fire department was right behind it. And they had seen flames coming from the roof of the parsonage. It had wood shingles. And the children were upstairs rehearsing for choir. And so they ran up and got the children out. They had seen this, and we didn't know it was happening. And got everybody out, and there was not a whole lot of damage because they had caught it early. But
they had seen it.
They had seen it from across the park.
Yeah.
Thank goodness. But that was the most excitement I think we had while I was the secretary there.
Rubie, excuse me, go ahead.
I was going to say, we had no equipment. We had an old mimeograph machine that you had to pour the ink into and take a brush and spread it around. And the bulletins and everything were, no, we did not do the bulletins. We took those to Artcraft Printers that was down next to the fire department, and had it printed each week. I had to type up the service and the whole thing, and then take it over there for them to do and go back and proofread it. But we did everything else on that mimeograph machine, and it was a mess. That's all the equipment we had. If we sent out a church letter, I typed every envelope.
The address on every envelope.
Right, and the minister wanted me to use the small size envelopes, which meant to fold the letters, you had to fold them both ways.
Yeah.
And I didn't have a lot of volunteers to help with that. But that was the job of the secretary at that time. It was an interesting experience, and I learned a lot, and changed my career pattern. I realized that one thing, I ordered the curriculum materials and distributed them, because there was no director of Christian education or any other staff at that time. And I realized they didn't know what they were doing a lot of times. They were willing to, and they could go and read the book to the children, but that was about it. And that made me realize that maybe there was something more I could do than just type letters.
In your time there had not been a big building, there was no building or anything purchased, land or buildings being built until 1948, and that was a big step for the church.
Well, yes.
And tell us something about that, because you had the 1893 church, you had the old parsonage from 1859, and now we needed to buy land further north so that
we had that land. We had bought that land, and there were 2 houses on it, and one of them housed, as I remember, maybe when I was still in high school. That's where the senior department met, the high school students met over
this is not the building. This is not the building with the garage apartment that the Scouts used.
No, there was a house in front of it, and there was another house where Trinity Hall is.
Okay.
And we had both of those, or maybe I don't know whether we had the Capiluto house. No, I know we did. We had the corner, because Ralph Houston, who was the associate minister, lived in that house.
That was further down, where the Terrell House became the Terrell House, right, yeah. Corner of Call and Duval. Corner of Call and Duval, yes.
And Ralph Houston and his wife and baby lived in that house. That was another job I had. Ralph was being ordained in the spring, and they were expecting their first child. And he didn't want her staying by herself, so I would go spend the nights with her, and scared to death because I didn't know if the baby came what I would do.
What he would be doing.
But anyhow, it didn't happen.
So the hospital at the time was Baptist out at
Dale
Mabry, yes.
Yeah, well, what had been Dale Mabry.
Yes.
Yeah.
Will you tell us then about the ministers, the time you were there, maybe a little bit before, a little bit after, and how important they were to Trinity's progress at the time?
When I first started working, Claude Haynes was the minister, and Ralph Houston was the associate. I think it was the middle of that first year that I was there, there had been a vacancy at Roadside Park in Jacksonville, and the conference asked Dr. Haynes to move to Jacksonville. So right in the middle of that year, it wasn't a conference time, it was in the middle of the year, he moved to Jacksonville, and they sent Claire Cotton to Trinity. Well, he was the one that got the building program underway, and hired Laurie Ray, who was a Methodist minister in the conference, who had specialized in fundraising, to come and raise funds for a building program. And I was involved in all of that.
This is for a new sanctuary?
No, this was for Trinity Hall.
This is for Trinity Hall, so the late 40s, 48 or so, okay.
So this was Trinity Hall. And we had loyalty dinners down in the basement of the old church for 5 nights. We served turkey and dressing and green beans, I think. You can't imagine what that kitchen was like. It was just the entrance off of Duval Street, and the stairs that went up to the sanctuary came down in that area, and there was a sink hung on one wall and a big stove.
This was in the 1893 church.
In 1893 church, and then there was a big room, this was down in the lower level, where they had the dinners, and they had, you've seen pictures probably, I've seen pictures.
I have seen, yes.
Of all those rows of tables. And the dinner was cooked in the Florida Hotel and the Cherokee Hotel. My dad was at the Florida at the time, and the Stiles family had the Cherokee Hotel. And so between them, they got the turkeys cooked.
Brought it down.
And brought it down to the church. There was no way to cook for that many people for 5 nights. But they did.
Projecting the cost of a dinner was $1, maybe, or $1.50.
Probably.
At the most, and you had 100 people there, you know, so one night was bringing in $100 or $150 times 5 nights, so you weren't even at the $1,000 threshold for that much work. But anyway, that was.
And all the and I don't know whether some of it was donated. As far as I know, Daddy came and carved all those turkeys. Mm-hmm. And they served and got pledges every night to build Trinity Hall.
So that was the main thing, get pledges for,
that's right.
for the
that's
future.
What it was
to
all
have
about.
It done. Yes,
to get money to build Trinity Hall. And then the next fall, I left to go to graduate school. So
was the building in progress
no,
then?
It hadn't even started.
So that would have been 48 that we dedicated the church, Trinity Hall in 49.
Yeah. Well, I left in the fall of 48 to go to graduate school. And all of that happened after I left. But that was the big thing that happened during my time in the church office. We did, over those 2 years, Mr. Edwin White, who was a member, was he president of Tallahassee Federal Savings and Loan? At that time, it was across from the post office on Park Avenue, probably next to where the Doubletree is. And he had some addressograph plates made and had an addressograph machine in his office, in the bank building. And I would go over there and address envelopes so I didn't have to type them all.
Somebody had to make those little plates to begin with that punch machine.
And so all of that got done, and that was as modern as we got during the time that I was in the church office. After I left, they did hire someone to be the director of Christian education, and then Mr. Pat came, who was there for a number of years, and many children remember, now adults remember him.
Who was that, Pat?
Pat. I've forgotten his first name. His last name was Patrick.
Doesn't come to mind.
Because he was called Mr. Pat all the time.
Tell us the people that were paramount in the church that were movers, that names that people that had Trinity at the top of their list of what they wanted to do to keep the church going.
Always, Frank Moore and Payne Majette were paramount in any, and Godfrey Smith and Ernest Menendez. The ones I remember the most. Beth Moore, probably.
Beth.
Mrs. Frank Moore.
Mm-hmm. So to conclude our interview with you, please tell us, when you left, then you came back, and what had transpired in the history of Trinity from the time of
goodness. When I came back 20 years later, because after I got my degree and went on to work in some other churches and married and had a family, we decided to come to Tallahassee. My parents were still here, and members of Trinity. Dr. Foster, George Foster, was the minister at that time. And Madeline Wilson, the staff, of course, had grown a great deal during that time. Madeline Wilson was the director of Christian education, and she lived in the little house down on the corner. She moved away, and so Dr. Foster asked me if I would be interested in working at Trinity. So I did, as the director of Christian education for several years until my daughter was born, and I stopped working for a while. And then when Walter Califf came, he wanted another staff position, and when that was approved, I became the assistant to the minister and the coordinator of older adult ministries, which we had not had before. And so that was a challenge for me, because I had worked with children and youth most of the time. So it's been a good experience. And well, I had worked with elder care services for a little while before I came back to Trinity. So I'd had some experience in training with working with older adults. And so that
when
was
you
my
left,
last.
when you left, you came back 20 years later.
Mm-hmm.
So when you came back, the parsonage, the old parsonage was gone. The 1893 church had been torn down. We are in the present sanctuary,
Right.
the 1964 sanctuary, and just new surroundings for you to do your job.
Right, but at the same time, when Dr. Califf came, he had a church planning committee formed, and I was on that committee, and Elder Smith, Ms. Orson Smith, was the chair, I think. We worked for months developing a 5-year plan, because the church really was not doing a whole lot. And depending on the staff mainly to do everything. And so that committee met for, maybe 6 months, developing and visiting other churches, talking to other staff people around, and finding out what other churches were doing and how they were doing it. And out of that came the renovation of Trinity Hall. We moved the children out for a number of months, and the young children met over at the Presbyterian Church with us.
This was the early 80s then, I guess.
Yeah.
Early 80s, yeah.
Yeah. And so I was a part of all of that transition to get some renovation done in Trinity Hall that was badly needed.
Did you work, do you remember the formation of the preschool, or was that the time that you were gone?
There had been a Trinity kindergarten before the public schools had a kindergarten. And my son Jim we had moved back to Tallahassee right at the end of that period.
What year are we talking about?
67?
You said 20 years.
67, 68. Was the last year of the kindergarten at Trinity, because the public schools opened for 5-year-olds. Then Mary Blackburn and Claire Nash started a preschool about the time my daughter was ready to go to preschool. And that would have been 75 or so.
I'd have to do
I
more
don't know.
research on that one.
We'd
Yeah.
have to look that up, but it was something like that. So that's when that program started.
Rubie, thank you for sharing all of that with us.
Well, it's fun to remember.
I want you to jot down anything that we did not do this time in your home, and maybe come back and we can pick up on other topics or items that come to mind after we close the door on this interview.
Okay,
But
can I just remembered one thing going way back. Can I put that in?
I want you to, yes, please.
Okay. My great-grandfather, J.T. Burlin, Jesse Burlin, was the Sunday school superintendent and a trustee for many years. And one of the windows in the addition that was added to the old church, there were several windows back there that were not as pretty as the ones in the main part of the sanctuary. But one of those windows was dedicated to him. And I just wanted to...
Do you have that? We don't have that window now.
No, I wish the family had, I wasn't here, but I wish they had at least kept the memorial part of it, the dedication part, because I don't know whether he was still living when that was, probably not. No, he wouldn't have been when that was.
Was he the mayor at one time?
He was the mayor twice, I think, of Tallahassee, and he was the commissioner from Florida to the World's Fair in Chicago
39?
in 1890-something, 3.
Uh-huh.
And also, I don't know what the title was, to the Centennial Convention in Philadelphia in 1876. He was the delegate from Florida to that. And I have some memorabilia from that experience. And that little flower plaque came from that. Somebody gave it to him there.
Rubie, to end this, will you give some words to those that are following, that we can use your life and use your family's life and history, the Trinity's history, and maybe we can pass it on to those that are viewing this at a later time, and let this be the conclusion of today's interview?
Well, I just hope that people recognize and love the witness that Trinity has had for almost 200 years now in Tallahassee. It's been on that corner, not all the time, but most of the time, and hopefully it will stay as strong and witnessing to our faith for many more years to come. And it will take dedicated people, families that stay at Trinity and work to keep it vibrant and meaningful to the community and to the world, because we reach out. One of the windows in the old church was dedicated to a missionary to China from here, from our church. And that goes way, way back. And I hope that in the future we will have missionaries and church workers. My son has started a scholarship fund through the Board of Higher Education to help persons that want to be deacons in the local church. That was the thing I wanted it to be, was for people that want to work in the local church, because that's where it all starts as far as I'm concerned.
So is it a stipend or so for these individuals, or just encouragement to go into this aspect of the...
You mean the scholarship?
Well, yes, is that what he's doing, establishing scholarships?
Is establishing an endowment to provide scholarships for, in my name,
In your name,
in
okay?
my name, and
That's
I'm so honored
Yes.
that
for
he
sure.
wanted to do
Is this
that
on the national level or?
on the national level,
Wow.
in the General Board of Higher Education. And persons who have graduated from college and want to go on to graduate school and get their degrees to be deacons. I particularly want them to be deacons and not elders, not preachers, but people that will work in the local church, primarily in education, but whatever. Because I feel like the local church is so important. So,
Very good. Thank you for hosting us, and thank you so much for your memories, Rubie. It's you remember so well. It's so well too.
well, it was my life.
That's great. Thank you so much.
We do thank you, we do thank you. And remember, we can come back again with this list of things you wanted to tell, but we forgot to touch on those today.
I think we touched on a lot.
We did a lot.
Most of the things that matter.
Great. Thank you again.